for somebody.
Okay. Okay. Hello, good evening, and welcome to the Board of Selectmen for the Town of Littleton meeting for Monday, December 17, 2018. I'll read through the proposed agenda. We will first do organization, Pledge of Allegiance, read mail. 6:35, we're going to get various department updates from DPW, Light and Water Department, and cable, Littleton Cable Television. Park and Rec, and another topic with the Littleton Light and Water Department. 7:05, we're scheduled to have public input and members' updates. 7:15, two properties under consideration in the tax title abutter lot sales program. 7:25, planning board vacancy discussion. 7:30, an update on the Littleton Common Smart Sewer Project. 8:30, various updates from our interim town administrator regarding license renewals, project alert, and another licensing consideration. We're scheduled for minutes at 8:30 and executive session at 8:35.
We didn't end up with minutes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay,
so
that's fine. And none of these are public hearings, so if we're able to move quicker, we will. All right, so with that, Madam Clerk, would you lead us to the pledge?
Certainly. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, Anthony, would you take us through the mail?
Certainly, Mr. Chairman. First item, I just want to make the public aware of our holiday hours notice. Town Hall will be closing early on Monday, December 24th and December 31st at 1 p.m. It's posted on social media, Facebook, and our Twitter account. It will be posted on our website tomorrow. And just want to make sure the viewers know to plan accordingly for those days if you have business to do at Town Hall. Next item we have is a couple of notices that the Star India Network will no longer be on Xfinity or Verizon, and that's effective January 5th and January 4th for Verizon. Next item we have is, so this is a Littleton Light Night. Thank you, Nick and your team, for installing the electronic vehicle charging station at the library. There is 2 spots that are associated with that spot. Chris will be making up signs to let the public know that those spots are reserved for people that utilize the charging station. So once the signs are posted, which there is a $25 fine for parking in an area that you shouldn't be parked in if you do not have an electric vehicle car. So thank you, Nick.
It was Ivan's idea.
Ivan, thank you. I knew it had to be. I knew it had to be somebody. Wow. The public thanks you. Notice.
Thank you for the charging station, anyway.
We received the award from the Central Mass Municipal Recycling Council Recognition Award, and this is our DPW. As a result of our pay-as-you-throw that was implemented back in, 2010, since that time, when we first, before we had 2,185 tons of municipal solid waste. After a couple of years, it was reduced in 2016 and 2017 by 1,213, and in 17, 1,153 tons. And so that reflects a 40% reduction. So kudos to Chris and his staff. Katie Tocci also works on writing the grants for Chris and his team, and she's been getting a bunch of grants, and she has $15,750 in grant funding as part of the DEP's Sustainable Materials Recovery Program. So great job by our DPW staff.
Congratulations.
We're full of recognitions today. So we received notification from the Massachusetts Municipal Association that our website was selected as the first place in our population range, which is 5,014, just shy of 15,000. So this is a great accomplishment for the staff. They really have spent a lot of time on working on that, so great job to Nancy Glencross and all the department heads for keeping our website up to date and trying to be as transparent, which makes that award possible. So we'll get that award at the annual meeting, which is January 19th at Friday night at 6 o'clock at the Heinz.
Terrific. Okay, and congratulations, as you say, to Nancy especially, and it's definitely a team project. I'll bet you we can win that award again, because there's a lot more we can do, too.
No question. We talk about that all the time.
Yep.
There's always room for improvement. Another notice from the MMA is that we also received one of the top 3 awards for our annual report. This was a project that we undertook and really rebranding our report, making it more transparent, and having some data, some pictures, make it a more readable document. We got recognized for doing such, and on January 19th, we'll find out where we place, either first, second, or third. But this is a great accomplishment, again, to everybody, because even with the school department, with having the contest to design the cover of it, really showed to MMA that we put a lot of emphasis and work into it, so it's nice to be
Were you the
recognized.
lead in putting this year's report together?
It's a teamwork, Mr.
Yeah, I
Chairman.
know, but I
It's,
assume since you didn't call somebody out that it was yours, so congratulations, Anthony, and the team.
The team really came through, thank you. And that's all we have for the meal packet.
Okay, so our first agenda item, department update. Chris, your Foster Street tip project, couple of concepts to consider, correct?
Yep, yeah, so I'm actually here tonight just so that way you can, the board can set a meeting, a public hearing date for January 14th.
January 14th, yes.
Basically what we've done is we've come up with, our engineers have been out there, they've surveyed the whole project limits. We've come up with 2 theoretical plans. So at that meeting, the 14th, we'd like to present them, pros and cons for both options. And then what we recommend, and then get your input, the public's input, and with the intention of trying to submit this to Mass DOT for 25% design at the end of January to try to keep this project moving along, so.
Now, you included a couple of aerial views, but they don't really show
No.
distinctions between the two.
No, exactly, so these were just, since I don't have the actual concept plans yet, they're still working on them. These were what were submitted to Mass DOT as part of the application process, but basically what it is one of the options has 2 bike lanes and then a 5-foot sidewalk on the north side. The other option is to remove the bike lanes and just do 2 11-foot travel lanes and then do a shared use 10-foot wide path, bicycle and pedestrian. The option with the sidewalk and the bike lanes has a little bit more right-of-way impact to some property owners. The 10-foot travel, the 10-foot shared use lane, doesn't. So there's pros, like I said, there's pros and cons to both. It'd be up to. So we want to bring them both to the board to get the public
So
input
the
before.
public hearing date you're looking for is on our January 14th meeting?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
7:15.
Any board members want to comment on it at this point?
Not at this time.
What's the process for notifying folks who in particular live right along
Yeah,
that way?
so as soon as you vote on this, we will send out the notifications. They have to be out at least 2 weeks in advance
Okay.
to the residents, and we'll post this on the website, so if any other residents that aren't direct abutters that get notified.
Great.
Okay, so it's direct abutters.
Direct abutters get
Get
notified,
notified.
mail, mail
The
copies.
notice section of the Independent too, we'll be posting that, so, and then on a bulletin board, like Chris said, it'll be
Yeah,
on the
we'll put it
website.
we'll put it on our page of the website and everything too.
Okay,
But the
We'll
most
put it as
effective
a
one will be the
newsfeed.
letter in the mail to the people who live there.
Correct, yeah.
okay. Let's also, if we could, send a note to BPAC.
Sure, yep.
Yes.
And have, make sure that they're aware of these
And I was thinking the Transportation Advisory Council
yeah.
as well.
And the master plan committee is now aware, because Mike's back here. Right?
We have a transportation group already functioning.
I'm aware, we appointed it, I'm just wanting to be, in a global sense, make sure you're aware too.
Yep, we are.
Okay, anything else, Chris?
No, that was it.
All right, board
Like I said, we'll have a
members,
lot more information on the 14th, obviously. so.
you okay with going ahead with making the motion? Board? Sure.
Move that the Board of Selectmen vote to schedule a public hearing on Monday, January 14th, 2019, at 7:15 PM on these two alternative concept plans for the Foster Street from Taylor Street to Balsam Lane TIP Transportation Improvement Program project. Concept 1, 2 11-foot wide travel lanes, 2 5-foot wide dedicated bike lanes, and a 5-foot wide sidewalk on the north side of Foster Street. And concept 2, 2-foot wide travel.
No, that's
Oh.
supposed to say 2 10-foot wide travel.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's pretty tiny travel.
Slows it down, traffic calm.
All right, so there you go.
2 10-foot wide.
2
travel.
10-foot wide travel lanes,
2-foot wide shoulders.
2 shoulders, 2.5-foot wide grass strip, and a 10-foot wide separated shared use path located on the north side of Foster Street.
Second.
Okay, the motion's been made by Selectman Napoli, seconded by Selectman Knox. Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? How many thought I was gonna remember to say the names on the motion? See?
There you go. I actually am impressed by that. Good job, Paul.
I'm not impressed.
Thank you, Chris.
You can do better.
Okay, Light and Water Department and LCTV, small cell technology.
So small.
You have a PowerPoint for us?
Got a PowerPoint, sure, but we're not gonna go on this like this.
Good, good, good. We had it in advance, so we did have a chance to read it over.
Good. So the one piece that I threw in here. I'm gonna do that again, Nick.
It's a big letter.
Okay, good.
I have one, thank you.
Appreciated the pictures and the presentation.
Us, yeah. Good, bad.
Right.
Idiot proof. Somebody put a lot of thought into it.
No. So I'm sure you're all wondering.
Audience.
I'm sure you're wondering why a video production supervisor is here with the general manager of Light and Water to talk about FCC's 5G. And it actually is a natural offshoot of what Alan McRae and Mark Croy talked to you about with regards to franchise fees.
Yeah.
The long story short, the existing providers who are paying us a franchise fee want to get out of the franchise agreement so they can pursue 5G plans. Pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
Now, in this particular case, the reason I'm talking to you, and maybe somebody not else, but I hope eventually you will secure the proper consulting and legal perspectives on all of this, is that there are things that are happening at the FCC federal level that collide rather massively with the state and also local practices. So there are, the website, I don't know whether you had a chance to take a look at it or not, but it's a pretty slick website. It talks about what they're doing in the regards to reducing issues with regards to local access, costs, and ensuring that when somebody comes knocking at our door, that we can deploy 5G in a rather seamless manner. So one of the things that you saw in bold was delays and prohibiting. There's a lot in the legislation that talks about anything that's viewed as delaying or prohibiting, particularly in a discriminatory fashion, is not going to be taken lightly. So you need to understand what has to happen internally, and in fact, that's one of the things that the one dissenter in the commission, FCC, did, was you're asking a lot of change to occur at the municipal level, and you haven't had a chance to get them up to speed on what's going on. So there's a lot of pieces of this that are still moving, things that are still out under review. I can't say that there's been a lawsuit again about the last third ruling of the FCC piece, but long story short, the FCC is trying to get to and preempt local authority and control over the select person's control of right-of-way and the space on telephone poles and electric poles that would be used to deploy the 5G technology. So if you look at, real quick, look at the picture there, you know, you don't have to memorize the parts and pieces, but long story short, right above that ground clearance space is a communication space, and that's normally where cable TV and phone has been deployed. Well, now they want access to the entire pole space. They want to be able to get up into the power distribution to put tower or put antennas on top of the poles themselves. So as you can probably see, there's a lot of details that have to be worked through. Want to ship the next one, Anthony? All righty, so what's happening? So we talked about this. We also mentioned about the franchise fees versus rental fees. When this FCC ruling came out originally, there was, I think, one city down in, I think, New Jersey, had worked out a very nice $1,500 per pole rental fee for 5G deployment. Once the FCC ruling came out, they reneged because the FCC said, well, you only need to pay $275 for each pole attachment. Needless to say, that didn't go over too well with a lot of municipalities, particularly ones that are home rule, which is what Massachusetts is, where we have exact mass general laws, in this case 166, 21, and 22, that define what you folks have control of with regards to placing poles in right-of-way, applying poles or wires to those poles, and any changes associated with it come through this body. What they're now talking about is removing that capability. They want to have the capability, for instance, of allowing for a permit to come into a municipality. And within 60 days, that's the new change, I think, from version 2 to version 3, within 60 days to allow for that permit to either be rejected or accepted. Obviously, it has to be a complete permit, but there's a lot of parts and pieces that are moving there that you folks all are aware of that we have to deal with when you're dealing with a building permit, let alone a special permit, where it has to cross a lot of different departments and a lot of different boards and committees. So as a result, we have to understand some of those pieces and also understand that this technology is going to get mounted on every pole every 500 feet. You can put multiple providers on a pole, but then we start to get into the stuff that Nick and his folks deal with as far as loading and space. And you're allowed to kick in anytime you want to, Chief.
You're doing great.
Well, thank you. So the real issue gets to be how do you interpret the FCC regs as it relates to mass general laws and to how it actually gets implemented down at the municipal level. So in this whole process, we have to look at design concerns and considerations of the equipment that's actually going to be deployed, the criteria that are there from an aesthetic perspective, issues about safety, because what's trying to be done here is that the goal of the technology is it's not unlike a physician where you can't do harm. So what do I mean by that? Well, if the FCC had its way, it would allow for qualified contractors to come in and actually touch the pole and get into that high power space. Now, in most cases, the make-ready work that they would be doing for 5G, for instance, probably wouldn't really get up into that space, correct me again, but they would be into more of the communication space, but they'll be going up and down and you'll have different vendors there. So there's always, well, who's the last one who touched the pole? What did they do? Did he do it right? And then you always have the concern about, are they mucking with the power infrastructure in town? So there's going to be some oversight that has to happen there. So there are bits and pieces that are there. Hazards, one of them that's still outstanding yet is what the RF emissions are with regards to these small cell transmitters. In a lot of the designs, they actually have a de-energizing circuit or switch at the base of the pole to turn it off so that when the linemen or 5G installers get up there into that environment, they shut down the transmitters. So there's a lot of new pieces that are there that in the past, the only people that have been in the pole or on the pole have been Nick's crews or qualified contractors. I think you have a very good relationship with Verizon about that. Okay?
Sure.
I love it. I just shake my head. But it's really a known quantity as far as if you're touching the pole, it's understood standards that you're complying with. So those are some issues that are there.
So I think the important takeaway is that they're trying to install equipment in the power space, which we don't have to allow under Mass General Law. But we can't prohibit them from expanding technology. So we need to come up with an agreement that allows them to promote technology and build technology out, but also fits our needs. Is the basic takeaway, I believe, from that.
Yep.
But it's largely going to be decided at the federal level, or is it?
Well,
I think it largely gets decided at the Board of Light and Water Commissioners.
right.
Well, right now.
Yeah,
anyway,
we'll develop those standards, and then we'll require whoever's attaching to our poles to follow those standards.
Right.
As long as we're not unduly prohibitive of
Exactly.
their ability to roll it out.
Non-discriminatory.
Right.
It's the same as the 4G technology right now with the shot clock and all this stuff where you can't deny an application because of health reasons and whatnot. The government has come out with legislation and said, okay, here are the steps. If you're proactive, then, and you know, it's like an overlay district. If you're proactive, then you can help guide that process.
So, great segue. 4G is primarily deployed on macro towers, the 4 or 5 large sites that we have deployed around town. Whereas now, that technology is going to get put on a pole near you. Right now, our current zoning bylaw does have information and requirements with regards to macro cells. Those are the ones that are 100 footers, that the 4G LTE-A standards are being deployed to. And then also for enclosed antenna that are in, I think, one of the church's towers, steeples. But for the rest of the stuff that we're talking about, obviously, there's nothing in there that talks about small cell deployment. What does it look like? What's it feel like? What are the power requirements? Does it have to be camouflaged? Does it have, you know, a lot of those aesthetic pieces as well as the technical details that Nick was alluding to, they're just unknown. And they're not in, for instance, in the bylaws, and that's something that we're gonna have to take a good look at. We did talk about the shot clock piece, and the defined piece as far as 60 days from submission to allow or deny. The other thing that the FCC wants to try and do is allow for a batch process, and that basically means, oh, well, vendor comes in and says, I got 10 poles I wanna put up, or 15 poles I wanna put up. Well, for them, it may be a batch process, but when it comes down to it, other than the name of the person and the company and what they're doing, the equipment has to be reviewed. It has to be reviewed on each site, because you want to allow the public to have some comment about, well, what's this thing that's going to be hanging outside my door or my window?
Each site being the
Each-
individual pole?
Because they're geologically different. You may have, some of the equipment that has to get deployed, besides what you may see or not see on those good, bad, or indifferent pictures, are pads that get placed on the ground that deal with battery backup, the computers, the cooling for those as well. Sometimes they've actually used a large cabinet. Sometimes they've actually disguised the old post box, the green post box, and put the equipment inside of that. But it's still a pad, and it still takes up space, and it has some aesthetic value. So, again, I'm not trying to say the sky is falling, guys, but more of it's new technology. We have to understand the pieces associated with it.
So going back to that, I'm sorry, I keep
Please.
screwing you up.
No, that's fine.
In the pictures that you showed, I didn't realize that 2 had what looked like green post boxes next to them. Those are part of the equipment.
That is correct.
Okay.
So in regards to the design criteria, we, the town, have some input as far as the aesthetics. Nick and his fine folks are going to be dealing with the technology, dealing with what's the make-ready work. Will overlashing be allowed? Will, you know, things happen within his electric space or not? So he's got his plate full in that regard, getting stuff ready for this process. On the other side, we have the whole application process and the permitting process and the uncertainties that are there because we hand things back and forth between groups for a special permit. Can we go to the next one? All right, so first steps.
So before we
Go ahead.
get off of that, we need to be careful with how we manage the right-of-way. And you have to do it in a manner that's non-discriminatory. So once you allow somebody into a right-of-way without having these procedures in place, opens the door for pretty much anything to be installed in the right-of-way.
So that's the reason for getting these in place quickly, right?
I wouldn't say quickly, just make sure that how we do it sets the process up.
Right.
It doesn't need, it's not a fire drill.
It's not to say that 5G is coming tomorrow to
No.
Littleton.
No.
They are still upgrading sites to 4G in this area. So they're gonna start in the major cities first. They're gonna start in Boston and work their way out, just like they did with 4G.
But you really don't know when they're gonna come,
No,
right?
and they've called.
Yeah, they have.
So it's not that they haven't called, but
Right.
we can hold them off, but we need to start the process
Yeah,
moving
no,
forward.
it's the right thing to do.
Yep.
What's the advantage of the 5G over 4G? If they're up in the towers now, there's only 5 in town, why do we have to?
Because the towers are now gonna be located on these power poles every 500 feet.
But my question is
Well,
why?
It
Joe,
off-
the-
it offloads capacity and speed. It's about bandwidth. It's about everything. It's about video streaming. It's about real-time access. And the faster, there's demands for more data, faster service. So that's gonna be able to, 5G is gonna be able to offer that localized areas. It's not gonna replace the 4G, it's gonna supplement the 4G.
So one of the other things too is that you'll hear a term when you review the information called densification. When you go from 4G to 5G, you change the bandwidth in the millimeter range, and as a result, things like trees and buildings and other things have a tendency to block the signal. So they take care of that by putting more of these small cells in different locations closer together, so that you can get the 10 times faster download, the latency going from 70 milliseconds to 1 millisecond, so that you can get your favorite movie downloaded in under 20 seconds versus half an hour. So it's always enabling technology like machine to machine, allowing for autonomous vehicles, for edge compute. I mean, there's a lot of little things that
Smart
are.
cities.
Thank you. And it sums it up right there.
Yeah.
Right. Good news is, from a permitting perspective, you've got the Viewpoint software that's up there. I've already met with Shelley and with Roland, and it will meet the requirements that we can actually put a lot of the pieces in there once we've got the forms put together and the whole process of how you distribute the information and how it gets out there, so that we can start meeting that kind of stuff. In the FCC presentation, they talk a lot about costs and justifying costs. And it's really kind of curious because the FCC wants to have rent charged on a cost basis, not a fair market value. I think it's really kind of funny because that's the in-kind piece in reverse, because Comcast and Verizon want to charge for their services in market and not cost. So it's kind of an interesting thing to look at. So we need to take a look at, go ahead.
With that in mind, so we're not going to be able to let them bid each other up for,
That's not clear, and that's a lot of the whole conversation about understanding our costs and where we want to be at. There have been places like Boston where they've got $500 per pole, and then they have a yearly fee that's associated with it. And some cases, it's a percentage of the revenue stream. So there's a lot of different models that are out there, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But the long story short is, we need to, unlike the green community stuff where we are doing that and we're getting money from it, but there's a lot of overhead with it. This, we need to really kind of go into it with our eyes open. Okay. All right, Nick talked about this before. We need to understand what we need to do to reserve assets. Because there may be things that come down the line, from closed circuit TV to, I don't know, some other things that you might think about, Nick, that go into that space.
I mean, there's fiber companies all over that space now.
Right.
This is very similar to how we handle a lot of pole attachment agreements now. The only difference is they're trying to go into the power space rather than the communication space.
Right.
So it's not very unsimilar to what we're doing already.
Right. So if you look at what happens in Boston, for instance, they developed some master agreements with the 5G providers. And that was a cookie cutter between, I think, 4 or 5 different vendors, and one for Verizon that covered their franchise fees. But long story short, you have that agreement, you already have it worked out on what the costs are going to be, what the processes are going to be, but then the permits come in, and as a result, you get them on a per-site basis, whether they come in onesies or twosies, or whether they come in as a batch. We've got membership into the Municipal Energy Association for Massachusetts, MMA, and things along this line, and these folks are starting to ferret out, understanding what the implications are, for instance, for a FCC and for their impacts, particularly Utility Commission had something they had in mind about, what are the fares and what are the rates between the Telecom and Communications Department. So it's basically, we need to make certain that you folks are there managing it, understanding it, that we're doing this and going forward, not like as on a fire drill, but that we don't have our first application come in and we're all kind of looking at each other and saying, well, what are we gonna do?
These companies try to divide the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Commissioners. I'm a commissioner in Georgetown, and that happened, where they didn't get the answer they wanted from the commissioners, so they went to the Board of Selectmen to try to get that answer. Now, just like here, the two boards communicate with each other and it wasn't an issue, but they will try to divide and conquer the boards to get what they want.
Right.
So
So,
we haven't had a sighting
request.
request in quite a while, but I think whenever we do, we generally reach out to folks
Well,
anyway. Right?
we've had calls over the last 2 to 3 years.
But I mean, none that have come,
None that come directly to you, they've come through us.
Right. And the one that he referenced in Georgetown was more of, let's throw the spaghetti on a wall, let's see what sticks. So, they're just poking out. It's not happening. I expect it not maybe before 2020 that we start looking at this kind of stuff, but, when
I just want to
go ahead.
underscore that our norm is to work collaboratively
Oh, yeah.
anyway on that, so that's.
Absolutely.
Right, but in the time frame, so it's gonna shoot with the action items. So, Nick is talking to the Electric Light and Water Group, the commissioners on Wednesday. Since Boxborough is serviced by Light and Water, we're gonna do the same conversation with those folks over there. We need to take a look at starting the amendment process, and Nick is gonna be presenting that to the Light and Water so that it comes from the Light and Water Group for an amendment process. He's got a lot of stuff he's got to do for, the technical piece of it. We've got stuff to do with the aesthetics. And we need to understand what those costs are for deploying and justifying fees, so that when it comes time, we're ready. But in the meantime, it's taking the time to educate ourselves and the residents, because, there are going to be some folks that may not be excited by having that small cell technology so close to the residential homes, for instance. And so there's going to be some people who are going to be upset. It's just the process. So, again, 5G is coming. It's not like sky is falling, but if we can get ahead of this in a good fashion, then I think we will save ourselves a lot of angst in the future. Any questions?
Board members?
I got one. You own the poles anyway, right? So,
We're joint owners, us and Verizon own the poles.
okay. And how about communities that are underground utilities?
That's where they typically look to streetlights, because a lot of those subdivisional streetlights, but they'll look for other structures, traffic signals, to install their infrastructure on.
So if you look at the picture that's, on the bad side, this one is, the one in the center, for instance, is a group of different 5G cells that are applied. It's not really aesthetically pleasing. The one to the right where the white Toyota is, that one was installed, and I think within a day there was graffiti scrawled on it. The woman who lived in the house was very surprised that this thing was being applied. The other thing we really haven't talked about is, I think, the 6904, which basically is another ruling in the FCC realm where vendors can actually come in after they cited something and expand it beyond what they originally talked about. So there are some interesting things that are there. I don't think we really want to have what's listed under bad on our polls. So if we can get in front of this and look at some of the technologies that are available from an aesthetics perspective, I think that will help us a lot to set expectations about we're not going to be a pushover, for instance.
Now, one of the market differences I see between good and bad here is the number of units per pole. Are we able to define and restrict that number without being unduly prescriptive?
I'm not sure yet.
Okay.
That's a good question, though. So, we're members of MEEM, which Kirby alluded to. So there's 40 municipals in the state that are looking into this at the same time. We're gonna hire a consultant to look for all 40 of us to kind of come up with the best practices.
Okay.
The IOUs are in a little different situation, because they have Mass General Law that they have to let them on the poles.
Okay.
So if you drive through National Grid or NSTAR territory or Eversource now, you'll see some of these small cells on their poles. We have a little better control of the right of way.
In existing contracts with locators, I assume you must have language that if you decide to get away from above-ground poles for a future date to go underground, do you have language that allows you?
No.
You don't?
In fact, when some of these utilities get off or stop using the infrastructure on the poles, they abandon it in place. So that's absolutely a concern of ours, that as we move forward, then you're gonna allow something like this.
You gotta have a provision in there that if you should choose to go.
Right, right, and that's pretty much boilerplate that I've seen as an abandonment clause, but, you know, you've gotta be
Well, not only
careful.
that, but if you get them in place, and you're the one who wants to change, they've gotta be able to change with you.
Right. Yeah, I agree. Yeah,
There's
most
benefits though too, where we have fiber.
Yeah.
We have dark fiber, so there's opportunities there for providing dark fiber to these carriers
Right,
and
as a
making
service.
revenue,
Yeah,
from that perspective as well.
that's right.
But from the abandoned,
No, not the advantage, just again, being proactive.
Right.
You know, and controlling that space, we have fiber,
right?
it's gonna cost you X per month.
Right.
Right.
So there's some upticks that can be there, but again, if we don't do this as a react, then again, we can look at this a little longer and say, I think I'd rather go that direction. Plus, there are already existing municipal power communities. Reading, Massachusetts is one that's already gone through the whole bylaw process, and you can actually see the changes that are in their zoning bylaws, for instance. So it's not like we have to reinvent the wheel here. We've already got some Massachusetts committees that are communities that have already gone that way.
You expect to have something for the Springtown meeting, not that soon?
I don't, I'm not sure, I mean, I would say fall would be, you know, I don't wanna rush this and come up with a bad process. It's that important to get it right.
Gotcha, yeah.
One other question in terms of foresight. Should we be looking at non-light and water infrastructure? You know, should Chris be looking at, you know, you mentioned traffic lights and
Right.
things like that.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Should we be putting this together simultaneously?
Oh, yeah, yeah, in fact, the fan out from the original permit process would probably go into, you know, whether it's the online cloud piece, would then fan through the planning board or originally go to Nick's organization for them to check for, is this, you know, form complete? Is everything submitted that's required? And then it fans out from the planning board to all the other organizations, departments, fire, highway, you name it.
I mean, think of the common area, which you guys have fought hard to protect all these years, where there's no poles there. That's an area you're gonna wanna keep protected.
Right.
You don't want poles being installed there for this purpose.
That's prime real estate for dropping 5G cell towers.
Well, with your help, we'll be prepared. So, is there anything you want from us to act on tonight, other than to thank you for already working proactively and collaboratively on this?
Yeah, this was purely informational.
Okay, great. Thank you, keep us updated.
All right, sounds good,
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, Alicia, Park and Rec. This will be an easy one, we just have to accept some gifts, right? So,
Yeah. Was the grant on here? The light and water one, or is it just these three?
Just those three.
Okay. Okay, so, we are in full swing for holiday helpers. And we have had some amazing, businesses and, organizations come out of, the woodwork, so to speak, and decided they wanted to help out with the holiday helpers, as well as the youth scholarship, fund. So we have, a few gifts tonight that I'm hoping that you guys will approve. We have $2,000 from Eric Van Stry of E-Designs, and $800 from the First Unitarian Church, which has already been approved by the Park Commission back in November. And we recently got a $5,000 gift donation from the Ed Walsh Foundation. So that is something the Park Commissioners will vote for in the next meeting that they have, but we would like to ask for your acceptance of this, as that's part of the process, so that we could help out the kids and holiday helpers.
terrific. Appreciate again your work in making this happen, and we appreciate, of course, the folks that are coming forward in a meaningful way financially, too.
Yeah.
Board members, any questions, comments?
No, I think it's a wonderful program. Thank you for spearheading that and helping out the children of the community. It's really great.
We're glad to do it. It's awesome, yeah.
Alicia, the selectmen did hear about the grant from the light department at the last meeting. They're
Oh,
not
okay.
required to actually accept the grant. Mass
Okay.
general law only requires them to accept the gift.
Oh, I see. Okay, so there's no need with that.
No,
Excellent.
they've already been briefed on that Chromebook grant from, again, the light
Light
department
wire.
really coming through
You
tonight.
guys are
Nick.
awesome.
Hey, thanks.
Well, it is that time of year.
Tis the season, right?
Oh, we know.
Okay, then if there's no further questions or comments, I'll entertain a motion.
Certainly. Move that the Board of Selectmen vote pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 53A, to deposit into the Youth Sports and Camp Scholarship Fund established on December 14th, 2015, donations of $2,000 from the Eric Van Stry of E-Design, $800 from the First Church Unitarian, and $5,000 from the Ed Walsh Foundation.
Second.
Okay, the motion's been made by Selectman Napoli, seconded by Selectman Knox. Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it.
Woo, thank you. We really appreciate it.
Spend it in all the right places.
Will indeed. All right, have a wonderful night.
All right, look at this, Light and Water Department again. Okay, back to the Whitcomb Ave property, 74 Whitcomb Avenue surplus property. We have obviously discussed this a lot. We had the town meeting vote and all that, but you're looking to act soon on it, and that requires action from our part.
Yeah, we'd like to go out to bid for the demolition of the building. Highway and Park and Rec aren't out of the building completely yet, but it should be by Christmas. they'll be
Promise
out.
you won't demolish it until they're out
We
of there,
won't
right?
demolish till they're out, yeah.
I promise.
But I figure since we're here already tonight, might be a good opportunity to get the vote to declare it surplus.
Okay, and everybody's okay with that, aware of it? Park and Rec, Highway, Anthony?
Yep.
We've covered all the issues? Sure, okay. Board members, questions, follow-up?
No.
Oh, okay, once again, I'll entertain a motion.
Certainly. Move that the Board of Selectmen vote pursuant to Article 7 of the October 29, 2018 special town meeting to declare 74 Wickham Avenue surplus and to transfer care, custody, control, and management of said parcel U40-15-0 from the Board of Selectmen and Highway Department to the Water Department to be used for Water Department purposes.
Second.
Okay, again, the motion's been made by Selectman Napoli, seconded by Selectman Knox. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it.
All right, appreciate
Is
it.
that it for you tonight?
This really is the
Is there
gift
anything
giving
else?
time of the year, huh?
All right.
Yeah, I mean, just so you guys know what the plan is, we're gonna be knocking the building down, restoring that parcel to its original state, which is within Zone 2 of the wells.
Right.
And we're gonna build a treatment plant across the street, which is out of Zone 2. The DEP is very receptive of it. I think it's good for the town, good for the DEP, good for the water department.
And you might have some spare parking spaces there, right?
Maybe.
Maybe?
Yeah, we need to get through the DEP process.
Okay,
But yeah, yes,
good.
I think so.
Thank you much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nick.
Okay.
Thanks,
our
Ivan.
Next agenda items were public input and members' updates. Members of the public, any member of the public who wants to address an issue that is not presently on the agenda? Seeing none, moving right along, board members. I want to get that out before Gino was paying
He
attention.
just had some at the tip of his tongue. Did you see that? Gina was.
All right, board members, selectmen. Huh? That's right. I just want to hear you say Merry Christmas in 5 languages. Gino speaks 5 languages, don't you? Well, come on. I don't know, like, all of a sudden he's humble. All right, yeah. Yes. Selectman Knox.
Nothing other than wish everyone a good and happy holiday.
Yes. Okay. Selectman Gerbig.
In the context of members' updates, where we stand with the TA selection process, we've got the assessment center coming up. The structure of that, I think I sent everyone an email. What we're going to be doing is videotaping the applicants as they go through the assessment center.
So that we can view them at our leisure. that's
So
what-
you can view them at your leisure, and to be perfectly clear about this, the Board of Selectmen should not attend the live
Okay,
sessions. And the reason for that is to protect the confidentiality of those candidates who ultimately don't get recommended on to the, to be finalists. The Board of Selectmen will only have access to the videotaped assessments of those candidates who are recommended as finalists. Those that are not, will be stored as HR files and so on and so forth. That then, following the assessment center, then, that's coming up shortly, then the TA selection committee will need to meet again and figure out how we're going to get from 5 applicants down to 3.
Has that decision already been made internally to your group that you plan on recommending 3?
Oh,
or bringing
and
forward
sorry,
3?
I should be more fair about that. 3 seems to be the general consensus right now, that like, that's like, if we go from 5 and we just recommend 5 to the Board of Selectmen, I'm not sure that we've accomplished anything. It could be 2 candidates, I mean, by bylaw, we need to recommend 2 out.
Right.
3 is my guess of where we'll land, but it could be 2, 3, 4, or 5. And I expect we will be in a position to do that prior to our January 14th Board of Selectmen meeting.
Right.
And then once the TA selection committee recommends those finalists out, we're done as a selection committee, and it becomes our ball to carry as the
Right.
Board of Selectmen. So
Okay. So we should be
figure out how
prepared
to agenda that.
for the 14th to be looking to schedule interviews and all that sort of thing.
I think that would be the appropriate
Yeah.
choice.
And we can discuss then whether we want to do it at a regularly scheduled night or separate nights or whatever else. And you probably ought to look, Anthony, at the scheduling.
Probably should be a
considerations.
separate, yeah, you probably should do a separate night, because the 14th is starting to already
Board
fill
members
up.
have initial thoughts on that part of it when we go to do interviews, having a separate night for interviews or a regular meeting, does it make much?
Oh, I think a separate night would be better,
I think it would be better.
personally, yeah.
If for no other reason than the folks who just want to attend our regularly scheduled meeting to do normal course of business.
Right.
So we all, maybe just, one thing we can do to make sure our process moves expeditiously is, if we know of any, dates that don't work in the middle of January for any of us, forward them along, and we'll try to schedule around that.
Okay.
And with that, the sooner the task makes the decision on who the finalists are, the sooner the information can be provided to the Board of Selectmen about, I would hate to make that decision 2 days in advance of the Board of
Right,
Selectmen meeting and give you a finite amount of
Right.
time to actually consume a reasonably significant amount of material.
Right.
That will be done through the assessment center
And you're
so we do
confident
our
that
own
your
homework.
process will be wrapped up early enough that you'll be able to do that?
Particularly because our meeting in January is the 14th, I'm pretty confident in that.
Okay.
We haven't scheduled for exactly what it'll look like after that, but I think essentially we're gonna lock the task in a room, and
Right.
we're not gonna leave until we have at least 2 and hopefully, 3-ish candidates.
Okay. Other comments on this topic? Okay. Feel free to follow up with Chase too, if something occurs to you later.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, anything else?
No,
You mean, you're too busy with that to do anything else for you?
well, I can tell you all about the sewer, but it's already
Yeah, I know.
agenda. It's-
Two busiest projects we get going, and Chase is deep in the midst of both of them. That's the
Right.
point I was trying to obliquely get to. So we thank you for that. Your family will get you back at some point.
That's okay, they're better off without me usually.
Cindy, it's like with that.
Certainly. So I just, in moving ahead with the grant application for the Veterans Corner project, as you know, we got selected to apply for a $15,000 matching grant. We've already have close to $13,000 in commitments to pledges to match those funds, if in fact we do receive the $15,000. So I want to thank Chris Stoddard for working with me on the design piece of that grant application, and I'm hoping to have everything finalized by the end of the month. And I'll certainly share the final version of that once it's complete. I'm still looking for letters about the Veterans Corner. That's part of the grant application, is they're asking people, veterans or just residents from the community, to write about the Veterans Corner, what it means to you, what it means to our town, just to help support the need for the project in the eyes of the people that are going to issue the grant funds to us. So if anyone would like to write a letter, they can certainly email it to friendsofveterans01460@gmail.com. There's been a couple letters that have been dropped off here at the Selectmen's office at Town Hall, which I appreciate people doing that, and anything that, there's no right or wrong thing to write. A lot of people have said, well, what do I write? I don't know what to write. You can just write anything. There's no right or wrong answer here, so any support you can provide is appreciated. And that's it.
Terrific, thank you. All right. I don't have any specific update either, other than to reiterate what Selectman Knox said. Merry Christmas, happy holidays to everyone, whatever it is you're celebrating.
I have one other thing.
Oh, sure.
Anna sent me a text message and reminded me that I should probably give you guys an update on where that master plan implementation
Oh,
committee
good.
is, and see, Mike approves. Keeping our eyes on this. And the principal takeaway is that essentially the focus for next year on advancing a lot of the land use aspects of the master plan implementation committee. And I say land use very deliberately to encompass both the housing aspects of land use as well as the open space aspects of land use, and sort of moving those together simultaneously rather than trying to advance the ball there in a vacuum. And we see the master plan implementation committee as an ideal forum to do that, because we exist to break down those silos. And right now, some of those silos exist. And we think the master plan implementation committee can help coordinate and move those things forward a little bit. The specifics of that are, well, we're still fleshing that out a little bit.
Good. Appropriate, given the flavor of the dialogue we've been hearing from the public over the past several months, development-related, land lease-related.
One thing that very much has come up, and it's been an expressed goal of the Board of Selectmen, as well as other boards and committees, is that rubric or scoring to evaluate open space parcels as they become available.
Right.
And how we actually implement that and find agreement on it, because one has been proposed, several years ago. Nobody's really taken up that mantle, but it's been a goal of ours for some time and would fit well with the master plan implementation committee's work to move that land use goal forward.
Right.
Or goals.
Good. I'm glad that's a focal point and getting some attention.
Right.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah. Okay, yes, Anna.
Mr. Chair, if I could just add to what Chase just said, the planning board is also looking forward to that kind of an open discussion with the selectmen and any other groups that are appropriate to bring together to have those kind of discussions.
We always look forward to working with our friends in the planning board.
You're gonna make some new friends.
Yeah, right. All right, our agenda's 7:15 item. Town Treasurer Steve Venuti, you want to come forward, Steve, and walk us through? I assume these will be pretty perfunctory at this point. Sales for the two tax title
lot
about it, yes.
sales.
Yeah, neither one of these are new to us, all right?
No, they're voted at town meeting.
Right.
Walk them into the program. You can see that the two shaded areas on the map, those are the two lots that are being sold.
Yeah, both contiguous to the same town property, the former Yap property.
It's foreclosed property from the Yap parcel that we had.
Yep.
There was two additional lots originally, those people have backed out. So effective 12/31/18, those unsold lots plus the remainder of that parcel go to the control of the Conservation Commission, according to what town meeting voted. We have these two lots. I received the checks today. You have the deeds
Okay.
somewhere.
Right here.
Anthony, need to sign those and we'll get filed and.
All right, I think we are required to vote them separately, and probably just for the edification of the public, it's not a bad idea, I don't think, to review each lot separately. If you don't mind, maybe we'll start with the first one, the U14-117-0, that's the smaller of the two, the 1,147 square foot parcel. Maybe you ought to show the map again, Anthony,
Sure,
please.
so that's the one to the left, the narrow, yes.
Dark strip,
Dark
and it essentially kicks out, what, 10 feet? Is that what it is? About 10 feet by how long is that?
115.
Yeah. I remember doing the site walk with the interested abutters, and we had other folks there, and even though that, this is our access way from Newtown Road into the conservation land and back, everybody there seemed to agree that it wasn't gonna propose a great threat to the access way, not a, wide enough corridor to make much of a problem. It is gonna potentially dislodge the stone wall at some point when you make use of your property, but it's just gonna take a little curve. So after kicking that around, I think everybody's been in agreement that this is the sort of reason we have these programs in place, so we can help neighbors out with their backyards and maximize the use of their property without doing any negative damage to the town's interests. So, board members, do you have any questions on this one? I think we're all
No.
familiar with it. I think pretty much
Yeah.
everybody here was at the
At the sidewalk.
right?
One commentary, broad commentary that I have here is that I think when we finally get around to that objective of looking at our policies and procedures, one thing that we could do to significantly improve this particular one is a requirement that when someone applies to acquire a piece of tax title property, under this program, all abutters of that property are then noticed that that's going forward. Because that, frankly, that's how we got into this position, where one person applied and then we kind of,
Moved on.
we
it back up,
backtracked
right.
and we said, oh, maybe we should let some abutters know, and then we didn't let all abutters
Yeah.
know. And a subtle tweak to that could really,
You could probably do that administratively, couldn't you?
Generally, under the abutters program, when town meeting votes a lot, it's generally a lot that fits that program. This was a larger parcel that wouldn't be in that program, and the selectmen voted to just subdivide pieces of it. So this is the first time we've done something like that.
Oh, okay.
Generally,
so
it's
maybe
a
we don't need
But
to
would-
create
but would-
one-off rules.
4,800 square foot parcel or less, and we notify anybody who touches it, put into the program.
Okay.
Okay.
Ordinarily, when you put a parcel out, do you notice all the abutters? Yes, okay. All right, so this is kind of
This was
unique.
a little special
Right.
circumstance.
Okay, terrific. All right. I know we have the anxious prospective owners, new owners ready here. They want to put it right under the Christmas tree there. So I don't know if there's any other questions here, or whether we just want to proceed to a vote. We can certainly do that.
Ready?
Yep.
Move that the Board of Selectmen vote pursuant to Article 21 of the May 7th, 2018 Annual Town Meeting, and in accordance with the tax title abutter lot sales program adopted on December 5th, 2011, to approve the sale of the following tax title parcel and the execution by the Board of Selectmen of deed prepared by Town Council, a 1,147 square foot portion of parcel U 14-117-0 comprised of 26,571.60 square feet abutting 3 Manchester Drive.
Second?
Oh, we beat you to it this time. Motion made by Selectman Napoli, seconded by Selectman Gerbig. Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Mr. and Mrs. Jeffries, congratulations. All right, moving along to the bigger parcel.
This is a 4,800 square foot piece of that same parcel that's subdivided out.
And this doesn't present any,
On the
Yeah, at one point, as we could see, we thought we were gonna be approached by two different abutting property owners, right, prospectively to help with the
We approached
septic.
both parties and only one moved forward with the purchase.
Yeah, and it doesn't present any problems with the access to the property. I don't think there's anything significant specifically to that, nothing memorable on that one. Okay, so is there any board members' questions or comments on the second parcel? Or members of the public, for that matter? No. Okay, anything else to point out here, Steve? No? All right, well then, I guess, do we have the new owners present for that one?
We don't.
They got their check in though, right?
Made today.
All right, well then, they don't have to be here then, all right. I'll entertain a motion then.
Move that the Board of Selectmen vote pursuant to Article 21 of the May 7th, 2018 Annual Town Meeting in accordance with the tax title abutter lot sales program adopted on December 5th, 2011, to approve the sale of the following tax title parcel and the execution by the Board of Selectmen of deed prepared by Town Council. A 4,800 square foot portion of parcel U14-117-0 comprised of 26,571.60 square feet, abutting 416 Newtown Road.
Second.
Okay, the motion's been made by Selectman Napoli, seconded by Selectman Knox, who picked up his game a little bit. And any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Ayes have it. Great. Getting it back into the public hands.
We have the deed Steve just wants to take with him, so if we can get
okay.
those signed.
All right, we'll circulate those while, Anthony, while we're doing this, you can prep us on
Sure.
the next topic, which is the planning board vacancy.
Yes. So we received notification from the planning board that Jamie Cruz resigned effective December 11th. Therefore, what we'll be doing tonight is where the Board of Selectmen will be scheduling a joint meeting with the remaining members of the planning board for January 28th, 2019, at 7 PM. And we're inviting qualified registered voters of the town to fill that position until the May election. So we'll be putting in a legal notice in the newspaper tomorrow. We'll be posting it on our website, looking for potential members.
I'm sure I speak for everybody when I say that Jamie's was in the 3 years that she did serve on the planning board, a unique and important and a valuable voice on that board and a great contributor to the town, and hope at some point she'll be able to come back and join the town government and serving. Good night,
Thanks,
Steve. All right, and again, this is a joint appointment with the remaining members of the planning board, so, and it's important. A lot of people who speak out on issues, this is the sort of position where you can make a difference. So if you're interested, get your letter of intent in, and assuming the vote that's about to be taken, we'll be voting on this on January 28th collectively.
Yes.
And you've worked that out with Myron, have you?
We have.
You have, okay, great. Okay, board members, any further commentary on that?
Select, that was just one of the Selectmen Napoli, that's 2019.
I saw that.
Those-
I fixed it. Thanks.
Thank you.
At what point do we just wait for an election to, just as a broad policy? I mean, we're seating someone on the planning board at the end of January, February, March, April. So this is just for my own edification. At what point do we simply wait for the election to transpire? Or do we have to
Probably
seat someone?
dictated by, I don't know, that's a good question. It's dictated
There's
by
some,
law, right?
Anna may be able to explain further, but there's some votes that require a supermajority or something on the planning board, so they may not be able to take some action. So in order for them to continue to conduct business until May, it makes sense to fill that, so we'll be able
Oh,
to.
and I'm not advocating we don't fill it, it just,
It'd be helpful to know too, because I remember years ago, like, there was a vacancy on the selectmen, it was up, and it didn't come till January, and at that point, it was just decided to let it run until the election.
or conversely, I mean, I could envision a policy where if Jamie's term ended a year and change hence, we essentially appoint someone for a 15-month term. My concern
But I
is,
think state law speaks to that too, it's only to the
Right.
next
Only
election, and
to-
then you have to have another election to the following
Right.
election.
Right.
But it's worth looking, if you wouldn't mind either checking out yourself or having council take a look at that. What leeway does, what if both boards decided, we'll leave it? I'm sure that's not the case, but,
I think
And I'm not
Mass,
proposing that in this
no,
case at all.
I get that, yeah.
I think Mass General Law, Chapter 41, Section 11 spells out what we have to do, and I think it's pretty clear in there.
Is it what
but
you have to do or what you can do?
I can do?
What is
I'm gonna have, I'll double check and check with council.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be the one reason, as Anthony mentioned, in terms of the various hearings, and so those now need to be postponed until we
Yeah.
can seat 5.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, in this case, it's, not even, it's more an academic question, but what if this vacancy occurred in January? Would we fill it like that? I mean, knowing by the time you get around to filling, it would be like early March for what, a month and a half?
Hearings.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to ask, so the appointment process is going to be posted online, and then folks can apply through that, and there is no other criteria?
They have to be a registered voter.
And it's a joint appointment of the remaining members of both boards. Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess my only input to this whole process, after having been an appointed member of MPIC 2 years ago and now seated at the planning board, is that I really do hope that people out in the audience and our residents who are registered voters do apply and take into consideration the time that is involved in all of these different board positions, just because we want to make sure that folks have a sense of the number of hours and the commitment that we're looking for. Thank you.
It's not the sink in though, is it, Ann?
Oh, I kind of knew beforehand, but
Yeah.
4 meetings in 40 days, was a bit much.
Right. Okay,
Not as
terrific.
many as you guys, though.
No, I don't know, your meetings go pretty long, and you have a lot of subcommittees too. I think feeling all the same pain. Enjoying it, though. All right.
Thank you.
Okay, unless there's any other discussion, we can move forward then on a motion.
Sure. Move that the Board of Selectmen vote pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 40, Section 11, to receive the notice thereunder given by the remaining members of the Planning Board of the vacancy on said board created by the resignation of Jamie Cruz effective December 11th, 2018, and further to give notice to said remaining members that the Board of Selectmen shall convene a joint meeting with the intent to fill said vacancy through the May 2019 annual town election by joint appointment to be made on Monday, January 28th, 2019, at 7:00 p.m., and further to invite qualified registered voters of the town of Littleton to apply for said appointment and to be interviewed at said joint meeting.
Okay, the motion's made by Selectman Napoli, seconded by Selectman Knox. Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the ayes have it. We'll see you on the 28th of January, probably before. All right. Moving on, and I see Kent is here from Weston Sampson. Thank you for joining us. Okay, very good. Well, not very good, but we understand. Okay, Littleton Common Smart Sewer Project. As we all know, the funding article for the design was approved by town meeting, and the working group that Chase and I are members of has been diligently following up on that, trying to get ourselves in a position to do, to bring something meaningful to the town for a construction vote in the spring, and there's a lot that needs to happen between now and then, including a few items that we promised that we would revisit and flesh out based on the input we had, including alternative possible sites for the Quirk facility, fleshing out how the opt-in, opt-out process would work for people within the district, and then, of course, the project schedule itself, both for getting us to May and then construction after that. Before we get into the presentation, I guess Kent will be making the PowerPoint. I just want to do two things. One is, since we are looking at a lot of sites prospectively, these are in many cases property sites that we have not approached any property owner about, so we're going to refrain from referring to any sites by addresses or landowner's name, and And if, if that comes out in the wash and sites become viable, and we actually do approach people about it, then it becomes more public. But we don't want folks to find out on TV that we may or may not be coming knocking on their door.
Right, this was a paper and mapping exercise first,
Right,
and not a,
That's where we're at. So that's all I really wanted to add, and I know maybe before we get Kent going or what, Chase, anything you'd like to update the town on the board
well,
on?
I think the main takeaway that I want folks to get out of this is really about the alternative site review, and frankly, Weston and Sampson is gonna give us, as in the Board of Selectmen, enough information to, I think, make what ultimately amounts to a political decision weighing pros and cons of different sites. Different sites may have better features in some regard and worse in others, more cost, but farther away, or some balancing act there that actually lends itself reasonably well to the activities of the political process. So what Kent is going to talk to us about is how we get that information in the Board of Selectmen's hands and the public hands, and then I think we as a board need to figure out how we ultimately make a decision on what direction to go and what direction do we give Kent, because as much as the sewer working group might believe that we can come to the best answer and solution, it really should lie with
Right.
this board
And
to
then,
make such a
and then ultimately
determination.
the town
Right.
in those steps. Yeah. Okay, and I think our timetable for getting some of that stuff before the town is in Kent's presentation, so I don't think we want to eat up too much of that, right? All right.
So, good introduction. Obviously, the challenge is, it's a pretty aggressive timetable, which is where we'll end. That means that there's a number of tasks that we need to address pretty quickly. And you've outlined them pretty well. The first thing that's ongoing, and will probably remain ongoing for at least another month at this point in time, is the site review. We actually are going back and revisiting what we did at the beginning of the process, which was a map-based, as you said, site review. We started screening both groundwater discharge sites and quirk sites. We started that screening process with a map analysis that we did that started with every parcel in the town of Littleton, and used some tools to screen those back down to get an acceptable number of sites for these uses. We actually presented in late 2017, early 2018, the results of that initial screening that brought us down to originally something like 66 sites, which was then further screened down to somewhere around 10 sites, and then allowed us to get down to the sites that we focused on towards the end. We presented a lot of information on those. A number of those sites were privately owned. One of those sites, for the quirk in particular, was the publicly owned site, which is the LELWD and highway site out on Ayer Road. So we ended up kind of getting to the point where that looked like a good site, and we've proceeded with the financials around that. But as a result of discussions coming up to town meeting and a commitment that the board made prior to town meeting, we've now decided to, okay, push that aside, let's go back and revisit some of the things that were done in that screening. So for the past month or so, we've been looking pretty hard at some alternative ways to kind of sieve that data to see what could come up. At the same time, we reached out to a number of different folks who had knowledge of the town and asked to identify specific parcels that may or may not have passed through the sieve appropriately, and that maybe we missed something with the thought that we could actually come up with some alternatives. And I think we've done a pretty good job of poking those around. We've actually, even through the last couple of meetings that we had, continued to arrive at some additional sites that absolutely were in the original screening, but we want to pay attention to how they came out and what the pluses and minuses were in that. So what we've actually done is revised the matrix analysis that was done to screen those sites originally. We've re-emphasized one of the receptor issues. In particular, the thing that came up at town meeting was the sensitivity of the proximity to residences. And so we've really worked around that sensitivity issue, as well as some of those impact things that are going to happen. And we're continuing to look at...
Would it be, I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt you probably 10 times through this. In terms of the proximity to residences, I want to make sure folks understand, we've sort of gone through this idea a lot of different ways. There is essentially no place to put this facility in town that doesn't have some proximity to residences. And we can make it perhaps a little closer or a little farther, but you know, I don't know what the threshold is, if it's 1,000 feet or 1,500 feet, but I'm gonna guess it's in that ballpark where we literally can't put anything in town that's farther than that from residences.
Yeah, the best way to do that is put it out of town,
Right.
which we don't have an option to do. So, yeah, that's legit. Unfortunately, there are limitations, and there's also a lot of factors that come into play with this. One of those is just general location. And a lot of times, proximate to the service area requires it to be even more proximate to some of those receptors. You don't put a facility like this in an area that's completely undeveloped because there's nobody to use it in that area. We also can't reuse the resources that we've got. One of the focuses of the smart sewer concept is we want to reuse the resources like heat on the site. If we don't have any buildings around it, we can't do that. And we also don't want to go into sensitive areas that are pretty quiet right now and have trucking going in and out of those locations. So there's a lot of those factors that are coming into play. The good news is we've been through kind of the first cut of that. We've actually added a couple of additional sites since we went through that first cut. We're narrowing it down. We put together some draft memoranda. Our original vision of this is we're going to go through a couple of meetings with a smaller working group that we've had one already. And we expect to kind of come back with a couple of shortlisted sites.
Might even do some testing.
We probably will do some additional looking at those sites in some detail, and then we'll bring that information, as you said, Chase and Paul, to the select board for discussion. There is some promise there. Absolutely, one of the things we're factoring in at the back end of this analysis is cost. So there'll also be some discussion of cost impacts when we get to that. So that's one of the two big focuses we have right now. The second focus is the opt-in, opt-out process. This is probably one of the most sensitive things we need to deal with because it is very, very tricky to keep the schedule on pace if we don't know who's included in the process. So if we couple the site analysis and picking the sites for the facilities and the discharges, making sure we're settled with those as one item. The second item is who's included in the project. And that has kind of two pieces, and there's another piece we're going to talk about after this, which is the partners. But the big one is who's included that we already have drawn on the map. And so this is about reaching out to the folks who are going to be included and saying, okay, you're in the parcel, in the case of commercial industrial project properties, our vision is you're in the project area, you're in the project because of these reasons, and this is the process that we'll move forward with. In the case of residential parcels, you're in the project area for planning purposes, but we respect that you may want to make an individual decision for your lot. And our hope is, by the way, here's some answers to a lot of questions we think you're going to want to ask when you go to make that decision. Underscoring all that, though, is a real major facet of this, which is at some point we need to have a hard decision from those folks. And this is what we've been talking about in all our meetings to date and in our town meeting votes, that we would have a hard process. And at some point, in order to figure out who's going to be served by the project, we have to have that hard process. So this is all about being able to answer those questions, to give people the decision-making tools that they can make for their own parcel. How we're going to go about that, what some of the policies might be outlined in that process, which is part of answering those questions, and then getting us to what we hope is a decision by hopefully early April of this year, which gives us the ability to kind of outline that piece. And as I said, that's one of two pieces. The last piece of that is the major partners that we've talked about before. Obviously, we walked into this process with the identification of the Point and the IBM Hudson properties as the two major partners, but since then we've added a few other significant partners that we've had discussions with, and we're trying to advance those discussions as well. Again, the goal is to know by well before town meeting that we go into who's included and who's not. If we think about this from a schedule standpoint when we deal with those partners, and discussions with these are ongoing, what we need to be focused on is that our goal is somewhere in the middle of this first early 2019 schedule, you'll see an update to the financial plan. Our goal is to be able to answer enough of those questions with the opt-in, opt-out, the siting, the partner involvement, such that at the end of that kind of January, we have a revised sense of what the financials are. The reason it's critical to get it into January is it's part of answering the question for folks when they make their opt-in, opt-out decision. So it's critical that we update the costs again. We had pretty good costs for town meeting, but now we know a few more things. We're going to update those costs again. The next step in that process is continuing to go forward with some of the design preliminaries and some of the permitting things as we proceed with the opt-in, opt-out processes, so that we know a little bit more about this as we get through the end of the opt-in, opt-out. And at that point, we'll know things like, at the bottom of this piece of the schedule, flows and loads. What are we actually gonna treat? How much water are we gonna treat? What are the organic loads associated with that water, and what is that gonna mean for the actual treatment?
Now, one thing that's not in your schedule there, Kent, and if I was smart, I would have asked this in a sewer meeting. The opt-in, opt-out process, support meetings, all that stuff. When does somebody write their first check? When does that actually happen? When the water starts to flow?
So that's a great question, and that's part of what we intend to answer in that FAQ that we're gonna put together for people to make their decision, because it's a critical part of the decision-making, if people know when they're gonna do that.
Is there a
It's-
norm?
So there's two decisions to be made, and one is, I think Steve left, right?
Yeah.
So Steve left. So this is one of the things we're gonna be talking about when we meet. We have a small working group to meet on the opt-in, opt-out process coming up. I think we targeted early January for this. There is a possibility when you do a betterment process in sewers to send out some of the bills in advance for cash flow purposes. You can actually send a bill to folks once you know they're going to get the betterment and you're proceeding with the work before they can physically connect.
Okay.
And so there's a decision-making point for the town to decide that.
Do we have to do it the
Traditionally,
same
when-
for everyone?
Yes, yeah, you need to use the same method, and we've talked about this equivalent dwelling unit method for bettering folks. Traditionally, when folks have done that, you've selected a portion of your project cost to assess up front, and then you make a supplemental billing after you know the final project costs. There's some flexibility in that to certain degrees with the way we've actually designed the financing for the project. I don't know that the town will want to do that, but from a cash flow standpoint, you usually keep that option open. Traditionally, when you do that, you do not do that billing until the project is pretty close to implementation.
Okay.
Like, when you're going to proceed to construction, you bid, you know pretty much what your construction costs are, and you're just looking at cash flow.
Yep.
It would be there. So if you think about this, we're not really looking for most folks to get them into a system that's gonna be functional. If you kind of look at the end of this schedule, even the late 2019, we're only beginning construction. We're talking about probably late 2020, probably more realistically, early to mid 2021, when most of this goes online. Traditional approach is we wait till all the work is done and someone can physically connect before we send them a betterment bill.
Okay.
And then we issue a betterment bill. So it's very likely for most folks that the first time, if they opt in, say, March, they sign a letter in March that says, yeah, I'm fine, I'm not gonna prefer to opt out, I'm good to go.
2 years away before they see a
It's
bill.
likely that it's a good 2 years away before they see any bill at all. And then there's the aspect of how they can retire those costs, and as we talked about for betterments, betterments have an apportionment allowance that almost all towns adopt. Again, this is something the town has choice in, you don't have to do it a certain way, but the traditional way for that, and what we've talked about in most of the meetings, is you apportion over 20 years, you spread the principal out over a 20-year period, and you pay the interest off. And in this case, we've talked about a reduced interest rate of something below 3%, 2 point something percent. You pay that amount of interest each year with a small portion of the principal. And you can pay it off in the first year or the fifth year, but you have up to 20 years to pay it off. And in that way, it comes with your tax bill, so. So you do have some choices still, and one of our goals
Well,
is,
and I'm sorry, I interrupted you. One of the things that I want to be able to do is give people the maximum amount of notice
Right.
possible. Now, maybe the town decides that we're not comfortable shouldering all of those costs until literally the water starts to run. That's a decision we need to make, but you have 18 months to plan for this, or you
Right.
have, 2 years to plan for this is.
Yep.
That's.
and again, traditionally with this project, we have to date talked about a phased approach to building. Traditionally with a project like this, as we build each phase, we will bill those phase by phase.
Okay.
So if you're in, for instance, what we talked about as a phase 1A, a phase 1B, I've only identified the start of phase 1A in this. If you're in phase 2B, which is a lot of the residential properties that we've talked about including in this project, we've already said that's like 6 years out from there. So that's probably a 2026 start to construction, or 2025.
Now,
start
in
to
that
construction.
interim, how much flexibility does Gino's here, does the Board of Health have with respect to Title V and septic systems, if someone has said, yes, I'm gonna connect, the pipe is coming by my house next year, does Title V afford our Board of Health any flexibility there to string something along until that pipe shows up? I would hate for somebody to,
It's if it's a strictly, paper compliance issue, generally, towns use leeway when considering a project area that is imminently going to be connected to sewer.
right, it's been funded, it's coming.
Right, but you have to be very careful. Board of Health's purview is about public health. If there's an actual threat to public health that's imminent, even if there's a sewer project coming, Board of Health has to pay attention to the public health issue first. So there's some-
Prospectively order something like a temporary tank, that sort of thing.
Yeah, there's some leeway, but you've got to be real careful, and you don't want to take away the purview of the Board of Health to tell everybody, look, you can let your systems fail willy-nilly, and we can't do anything about it.
Gino
So there's a
wouldn't do
little
that,
bit
would
of.
you, Gino?
It doesn't work that way.
No.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, go ahead.
But the question is, if the septic system is, let's say, 50 years old, right?
Yeah.
If for 50 years old, the person always clean every 2 years, all right, and he has no problem. Like I've been telling the story many times. A guy from Cambridge came to us, and he said, I lived here for several months, and my septic system, you know what I mean? I said, did you ask the previous owner when he cleaned? Oh, yeah, he told me, he never cleaned it. 25 years went by. Of course the septic system is gonna break. Okay? So if you take care of the septic system, you have no problem. But the question is, if they are smart and they say, my septic system is 20 or 30 years old, and the pipe is coming through, and I have to wait 2 years, he says, I'm going on board. And that's why I mentioned to you many times, every street that goes by, make sure you get a T, so they can connect it. They put a nice, you know what I mean, like a big door, you know, concrete door, they can take it out and connect it. If it is too deep, put a T on top of it. You'll have no problem. But if you're gonna have to cut it out, you're gonna have problem.
I mean, there are systems, and Gino, you're right, there are systems who people defer maintenance on. And unfortunately, I have a person that works for me who has a rental property where their system was failed because the residents didn't pay attention to what they were flushing. If you destroy the field and you all of a sudden have backups in your house, there's not a lot you can do without doing some preliminary repairs. So there's a lot to be done there with that.
Well, in that situation, several people approach me and say, look, Gino, what do you think? If the pipe comes through my street, should I get connected? She says, figure out how long is your septic system. Don't worry, if it's good, if you feel that was put in 2 or 3 years ago, no problem, you can wait 2 years. But if it's longer and you think you have a problem, when you clean it, take advantage of it, because 10,000 is cheaper
That's the
than
answer.
45,000.
Now, this does make me think, though, that during the discussion of that opt-in, opt-out, we probably should make a visit to the Board of Health, the sewer
Absolutely.
committee as a group, and take the show on the road
Yeah,
a little bit.
That's good thinking.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep, makes sense.
Now Cindy, this is the one man who knows everything about every aspect of it. He's right in front of us. So if you have any questions, he's.
I do. So I think mine is, my questions are more, with regard to the opt-in, opt-out support meeting, is there going to be more than one meeting? And what exactly do you mean by an opt-in, opt-out support meeting? What does that
So
entail?
our vision right now is, and what we've heard from folks at some of the public meetings and our outreach, is that different folks want different types of support to make their decision on opt-in, opt-out, which is normal.
Right.
Some people are really good with wanting to do online research. If we post FAQs and have, our vision is right now is a set of FAQs specific to opt-in, opt-out that's boiled down so we don't bore people to read everything about everything we've ever done.
Right.
Also, though, supported by our general project FAQs, which we've already built over time, and there's a bunch of those up that were up there for town meeting. But there are other people who want to talk to someone. So we actually envision a couple of things. One is a specific meeting like we've done before, where we talk to people in general, short presentation, formalized, that kind of goes through the high points of this is the way the process works, to which we will invite everybody who's been invited to the project. But what we've talked about a little bit, and we haven't perfected this yet, this is still to be worked out as we go through defining the process, is having some additional time after that for some one-on-one. Because there's a lot of folks who have actually said to us, they'd prefer to be able to come up and talk with us about their own specific lot.
Right.
And their own specific instance, and get a little bit more one-on-one feedback from that. Our hope is that we can do that with a single broad scheduled time frame. I don't know if it's a Saturday morning presentation and then a 3-hour window or 5-hour window of just manning a table that people can roll in and out of and ask questions. I think if we do an open house type approach like that, with giving people a flexible window of time, I think we can probably do a good job of addressing most things in one meeting. The challenge is, what we have found is that if we schedule too many of the same meeting, we water down the number of people that will actually attend, and we don't reach as many people. And honestly, in practice, what happens is we'll schedule 3 and people will just come to the 3rd one.
My sense, and I think this probably is where Cindy's coming from, is we're starting to hear more from people with individual concerns about their own properties.
Right.
You know, what's it gonna cost me, how long can I do it?
Yeah.
They wanna have those conversations kind of in private, one-on-one.
I think
Right.
everybody likes to ask a one-on-one question,
And
and that's why
it's
we
a
want to
finite
maximize
enough
that.
universe, especially when you're considering the residential. There's only so many of them involved. It's not a huge list.
Right, right.
And then we also, one thing we thought we would do too with this is, with the FAQ, is we would also invite folks to be able to submit a question by email or written, if they want to stop by, if people don't have
You
email.
already
but
did
they
that
can-
to
Yeah,
some degree
I don't think we got a whole
before,
lot of
right?
response on that, did we?
Oh, I think we actually got quite a
Oh,
few
did we?
questions.
How
and
many
then-
would you say?
Oh my God, I bet we got 40 before that.
Oh, all right,
Yeah,
yeah,
and-
I didn't realize it got to
Chris,
that.
Chris and Anthony with Weston and Sampson's help wrote up answers to all of those.
Yeah, I saw that going on, I
Yeah,
just
I
didn't
saw
realize
that.
it reached that level.
Right,
Yeah, we did.
right.
And were they individual type questions on properties or more general to the?
No, probably 60% general.
Okay.
Right, they were very, many of them were from the town resident who is not going to connect to the sewers
Right.
perspective.
General tax.
Right. So as far as vetting the opt-in, opt-out group, you're gonna specifically invite them to an event on a specific day?
Yeah. And again, there's some subjectivity there. If you have a suggestion on the type of format, we'd love to hear it.
Right.
Because this really is about public outreach, and you folks know that pretty well for your community.
Right.
It's a really a trial and error thing to find what's the best way to connect with the most people. My own opinion is, I've done a lot of these, and I actually feel like, depending on what time of year you are, sometimes a weeknight doesn't really work well for a lot of
Right.
folks. And if you're in town and we're in school season, a lot of times, Saturday could be the right day to do it, depending
Right.
on what we do. But we need to talk about that a little bit to see what kind of support you want to bring. And certainly, if it comes to it and we need to offer 2 different types of windows, it's not really a hard thing.
That would make more sense to me, instead of
One of
pitching-
each, yeah.
One of each, just to give
Weeknight
people
and then a
options.
Saturday window too, or
Right, because
something.
different
Yeah.
times.
I would advocate too, maybe not even a weeknight, but actually a weekday. You know, we've got a lot of commercial property owners
Right.
who may want to connect and
Right.
would prefer to meet at 1 in the afternoon.
Right, right.
And not a small, amongst that
not everybody
population base,
works.
not a small bunch of elderly residential owners in that area
Right.
too, who might
People,
prefer.
if their kids are at school, they might be home, they might want to pop in. My other question, so that's for the people that want to opt in and opt out. What about just garnishing support of the community in general?
So-
In advance of town meeting?
So our goal is to get these questions answered so that we can have the right information for town meeting.
Right,
What we did for the last town meeting was we tried to get as much perfection as we could with, we did a lot of versions of financial planning for the town meeting, because that was a lot of the questions that were asked.
right,
We expect to continue the general outreach approach that we've been doing up to this point, which is, we have a pretty broad working group that we're gonna continue to work with the working group.
okay,
But I do envision that as we get through this, and I didn't put, this is not an exhaustive list of everything we're gonna do on this. For
Okay.
certain, I did share a memo, I think, that might have been in your packet as well, that was, kinda had a few more bullets on it than this one.
I don't know. Was that in there? I don't remember seeing that.
We gave it to you for the prior selectmen's meeting, did it go out before or not?
Oh, right,
that
that was
was-
in,
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it was in your prior packet.
Right, right.
So, the thought was to try to get this as close as we can. At some point, we need to confirm that we're going to be in front of the spring town meeting for a certain item. Right now, that's our target, and that's what this schedule is predicated on.
right.
When we confirm that, if you look in here, if you flip to the, actually, no, this is it. the mid to late 2019 schedule, if you look, I have a second updated financial plan and confirmation of district limits and approaches
Right.
in April. That's specifically with the understanding that we would be in May town meeting.
Right.
Our vision would be, I think, the same as we've done in the past, which is we would, prior to town meeting, we would do another general public outreach.
We hope to have no
presentation.
moving pieces beyond that early April date,
Yeah,
so that's a
and we'll
full,
What's the date of town meeting?
what, mine's the 10th? Is it that one?
So it's early May.
Yeah,
Well, is it that early?
I thought it was the middle of May.
Let me look.
That was May 6th.
I think it's May 6th.
Okay.
Yep, it would be May 6th.
Okay.
So we'll have to shoot a little earlier in April. If
Right.
we have a May 6th
Ju-
town meeting.
just
I forget what we
put
did
5 or 6
exactly before
weeks
town
ago,
meeting,
like-
but
Yeah.
I think
Yeah,
we
it's
did
May
like, this time we pushed right up against it. We were actually the week before town meeting that we did our public meeting. But you and the FinCom and the other boards will have hearings before that will be having additional discussions to make sure that everybody's on board with what's the current version of the plan.
Right.
I don't expect a lot, our goal is to not have a lot of changes, but certainly, a lot of these things we're doing now are gonna answer questions that before we've kind of done a planning view of. Now I expect we'll have a much solider view of that. If we physically know, before we did a straw poll, and Chris did a lot of work with it to try to get outreach to folks to see who might opt in and opt out.
Right.
But now that we ask a hard question, we get an actual firm answer back, we should have a lot more substantial answers to that, which
Okay.
we can then share, okay, what's the impact on the financial plan?
And that's the January, February, March timeframe
Yeah,
for all of that stuff.
Right, a lot to do in that period.
Ken,
Right.
put your hands over your ears real quick. My goal is to drive Weston and Sampson toward the May town meeting, but this is a very aggressive schedule.
Right.
And I do not intend to bring this to town meeting in May if it's not ready to be brought to town meeting in
Right.
May. I would rather defer it to the fall.
Right.
And have all of the answers
Do it
that we
right.
can.
Yeah.
That said, we're very much
Never bring
driving
anything that's
hard.
not ready, but that's still, but having a good, hard goal date to go towards is.
It is a motivator
It's a
for us,
motivator.
and I intend to keep that as a motivator for the time being, and I
Right.
intend to achieve that goal. However, if we miss,
If we're not ready.
we're okay.
Yeah.
But it's a bit of a thing to do. I mean, we have technical things that need to move forward, we have financial decisions that need to move forward, we have actually policy decisions that need to move forward, and then some general management pieces of this. And all of those have to be at the right position to be able to have the right information for town meeting. So it's
Right.
really important that you have that view, that we're gonna do what we need to do to make sure the right decision gets made.
Okay. Great, thank you.
And on an ongoing basis, by the way, if questions come, you don't have to wait for an update, especially since we're in a period now where we're not gonna be meeting for a little while. Ken's gonna be working, right?
Oh,
I mean,
around the clock.
Good
But
answer.
that does
Come to
actually,
my office and see me work on the 25th.
but that actually is an important point, you know,
Yeah.
particularly to the extent that individual residents, I mean, I was on the phone with someone on my way here to this meeting tonight who had questions and concerns. We will take the show on the road. Business owners
Right.
we've met with, residences we've talked to and met with, like we continue to do that.
And we'll be doing a lot more of that come January, yeah. Any other questions before our engineer, chief engineer leaves here? I think you folks are all pretty well conversant with it.
Just make sure you estimate for the job, it will be accurate, I mean, with a little flexibility maybe, okay? Because I work in a job and they take it for $105 million, and it cost them $120 million.
Yeah.
So the town had.
Well, we're gonna hire you then.
That is a very, very sensitive project. So you gotta make sure that all goes in the phase of the estimate that you give it to the town. Because if the town's gonna raise taxes, there's gonna be a lot of people crying.
Okay, thank you. Could you find Selectman Knox for us? Thank you, Ken. Okay, while the vice chair is making his way to the front of the room here, Anthony, we are at round 2 of the annual license renewal. What updates do you have for us?
Round 2, so at the last meeting on December 3rd, there were 2 licenses that you decided not to act on and hold off till tonight. One was Anthony's Coal-Fired Pizza. They had some sprinkler issues on the patio. I'm happy to report that they have resolved that issue to the satisfaction of the fire department and the building department, so they're ready to be approved.
Did the home office finally find out what was going on there?
Home office did, yes. The CEO did reach out to me. I owe him a phone call back. He was very appreciative of everything that Littleton did for him. And the second issue, a Class 2 used car license for Miller's Automotive. We still have a little bit of issue there, but I've been working with the owner. I feel very comfortable in recommending to the board that you would approve that. I'll continue to monitor that and report back in January for that license as well. So the first up is
So these would be contingent on satisfying the terms?
the Miller's Automotive would be contingent, yes. As far as the Anthony's, they're set to go. They've met all their requirements, including fees and everything, so.
All right. What we have for a blanket motion, though, is for all the licenses. Is that, did we already do that or not?
I think we did everybody,
Right.
but,
We did everything
So-
but these.
So the motion should,
So the motion in the packet, the
Oh.
one that's up here now, is to approve it as written in the December 3rd meeting.
but that would include Miller's, right?
This is just for Anthony's. So we can put, vote to approve, after the word approve,
okay.
Anthony's Coal-Fired Pizzas,
Gotcha.
annual renewal,
yeah. You know, I was looking at the one,
Yeah.
thinking it was two, but it's
Right.
not,
Second it.
obviously. Okay. We ready for a motion, board members?
Yep.
Okay, any further discussion?
No.
Okay. Madam Clerk?
So we're just doing Anthony's.
Right.
Move that the Board of Selectmen vote to approve the annual renewal of Anthony's Coal Fire Pizza
as printed.
as printed in the meeting notice addendum on December 3rd, 2018 for calendar year 2019.
Second?
Okay, the motion's been made by Selectman Napoli, seconded by Selectman Gerbig. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. The ayes have it. Great.
And the second issue is the Millers, and that's the motion. That was still contingent upon municipal charges.
Yeah.
I'm okay going forward with this, but I have the sense we may regret going forward on it, since not everything is all buttoned up. We'll see how it shakes out.
Well,
I mean,
we always have,
we're given-
it is contingent, and we always have the
Yeah,
right to revoke.
And that's
Yeah.
precisely what I was gonna lean on. They emphasize the contingent aspect of it.
Okay. And board members are familiar with the issues involved? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
All right, noting that, do we want to, noting Mr. Gerbig's input, do we want to have a motion?
Sure. Move that the Board of Selectmen vote to approve the annual renewal for Miller's Automotive Class 2 licenses for calendar year 2019, contingent upon payment of municipal charges.
Okay, the motion's made by Selectman Napoli.
Hold on. The motion we have in our packet is different than the motion that's up there.
It's the only thing left, so I adjusted the motion
Okay.
after the fact that the packet's done.
Understood. Sounds good, thanks.
Okay. The motion's been made by Selectman Napoli, seconded by Selectman Knox. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Great, thank you, Anthony. Project Alert. Is this your topic, Cindy?
It is,
Yes.
yeah.
Either one of you want to?
So this
Yeah,
is,
Go
I'll
ahead.
just give you the background as far as where the money will be coming from. So, part of the HCA with Sanctuary allows for the purpose of addressing potential health, safety, and other effects or impacts of an RMD cultivation facility. And it allows the Board of Selectmen, under their sole discretion, to use the funds in accordance with that. So, Project Alert is a great example of prevention, that the use of those HCA funds would be appropriate. So what Selectman Napoli's proposing is we allocate, or approve an expenditure of up to $3,000 to support the Project Alert teaching of that at the middle school, for actually right after the first of the year.
Right.
Or you're finding those untapped piles of money that, like an old pro. It's good to remember where it's hidden.
Right? In this case especially, so.
Yes, right, and it's
Right.
appropriate here.
Right.
Yeah, I
It
think this is
fits.
great.
It
Yeah.
fits, yeah.
Okay, do you want to speak to it any further?
Certainly, so Project Alert is scheduled to begin at the beginning of January. We have Alexa Paravalotis from the Littleton Coalition Against Addiction. She's going to be teaching along with Meg Wadzinski is the other instructor, and they've both spent a lot of time researching, educating, putting a lot of effort into preparing for this initiative. We're very excited about it. I know Chief Bernard has been a huge help and collaborator with me on this initiative, and we're looking forward to seeing this curriculum get implemented into the 7th grade. To begin with, we're hoping the concept behind Project Alert is it's taught in the 7th and the 8th grade. Once they move on from 8th grade to the high school, there's certain modules within the program that the high schoolers come back to teach. But right now, we're just going to start it out in the 7th grade and see how it goes this school year. So we're looking forward to seeing the results and getting Alexa and Meg in there to engage with the students.
Chief Bernard, anything to add?
No, Cindy pretty much summed it all up. The only other thing is John Janakis, our SRO now, is getting certified to teach Project Alert as a backup for either of the two.
Terrific.
It's excellent.
Quick question for you guys.
Yep.
How do we measure success?
Can't. It's a great question.
No,
Let's just
it's not an unreasonable answer. I'm just,
If we get to one kid, if one kid's reporting to us or opening up, we've done our job. And let's just hope that it carries forward and pays tenfold later down the road. When these kids get to the high school, they become the mentors for the 7th and 6th graders. Hopefully it's progression as we go forward.
Right.
is there any value in surveying kids or somehow trying to understand how we could?
Well, we do have the health survey through the
Yeah,
high
they
school.
do do a,
Every other year, I believe it's done.
Right.
In 9th grade and 10th grade, or
they do it for the middle school students and the high school students. They do a risk survey assessment.
Okay.
And so there is some interesting data within those findings. So maybe we'll see, something will come up
yeah.
as those surveys continue down the road.
Do we
but-
have any flexibility? Do you have any flexibility, Chief, with, adding a question or something to the survey that could more specifically address Project Alert?
There was a
next time?
basic survey that was sent out this week on some questions that we had that they were looking for. I'm sure we could work with the school committee and have some questions in regards to.
I'm not trying to create something that you feel
No,
like you
it's
just need to,
interesting. Well,
do to make me happy.
No, but the
I
other-
want to be able to show this is worth doing.
Right, well, the other thing we could possibly do is do a survey to the students that participate in the Project Alert program.
Right.
We could create our own survey in addition to the survey that's already in place.
I don't want to create work.
Yeah, no,
Think about
we can
ways to
talk about
measure how this is impacting the kids that we're rolling it out to, which then creates more data for us to use to go ask for state monies, federal monies.
Right,
Obviously, a survey like that would have to go through the superintendent and the school committee
right,
for
right,
approval.
oh, absolutely.
But worth pursuing.
Yeah,
All right. Any further discussion on the proposal? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
move that the Board of Selectmen vote pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 53A, to authorize an expenditure of $3,000 to support Teaching Project Alert. Said funds will be expended from the gift account created as a result of the Sanctuary Medicinals HCA payments.
Second.
Okay, the motion's been made by Selectman Napoli, seconded by Selectman Knox. Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? The ayes have it. Great, good work, Cindy.
Thanks.
Mr. Chairman, the last thing we have
Good work, Chief.
is we have a request from Greg Ehlers of the pub on the Common to extend his hours on New Year's Eve. He normally would close at 12 a.m. He's asking to extend it to 1 a.m. for that one time. And Mr. Ehlers is here if there's any questions.
Okay. Greg, how are you? Well, come on now, why not?
Have some Peppermint bark.
Yeah, yeah, right. Kathy Knox made this delicious, have some.
I'll get it on my way out.
So good that we put it as far away from us.
Yeah, you did, didn't you? Okay, we have been made aware through Anthony of what you're intending, but again, remind us of what you have in mind for New Year's Eve and.
Our
New
basic
Year's Eve.
rule is our last call is 11:30 to 11:45. Everything's off the table by 12, everybody out by 12. All I want to do is because the ball drops at 12, it's whether people are going to come to your establishment that night or not. The first year we opened, we did it, it was fine, but it wasn't that busy, so we stopped. And what we've heard over years is that if you're not open at 12 o'clock for people to toast the ball and then call it a night, you might as well close at 6 o'clock and call it a day. So what I really want is just to open till 1. It's really not, I'm not even looking to serve anymore.
And you're not like
No.
planning a special party,
No.
function, anything like
No,
that?
I just want a regular night, so at 12 o'clock, I don't have to throw everybody out the door when they're all trying to, hey, Happy New Year, blah, blah, blah. My goal is by 12:30, everyone's gone, clean up and call it a day. So it's really, I just know that at 12 o'clock, if I'm trying to kick people out, I don't want any issues. I don't want people coming by saying you were open. I'm trying to close. I want to be done, but that 1 extra hour will just make it easier for me to have everything taken care of and everybody out the door in a respectable hour, so.
You planning additional staffing?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yep. I'll have 3 bartenders and James and myself will both be there too, so there'll be 5
Okay, so
of us.
both
Oh, absolutely.
managers will be
Yep.
there as well?
Mhm.
Okay. Okay, that's good to hear. I'm sure board members all have questions or thoughts on it.
I just want, if I can,
Joe? Sure.
any chance, could you accomplish the same thing by closing at 12:30?
Probably. Yep. I would just, it could be 12:30, it could be 1. I think 12:30 is fine too. I just want the 12 to 12:30 so I don't have, people driving by saying you're still open. I want to go home too, just like everybody else. But yeah, I always said 1 to try to, in case I have extra time, because we usually close and everyone's out by 12. Takes another hour or so to clean up anyway, just to get the stuff done. But yeah, 12:30 would be fine, not a problem either. So
I
either
mean,
way.
but realistically, if you're still serving a drink at 12, I mean, I'd be inclined to give you the additional half hour to 1. You think, you're still gonna get everybody out of there by 12:30?
I think 1's safe. I think 12:30 would, there'll be no more drinking going on, because
Right.
once 12 o'clock hits, within the 15 minutes, it's last call, because I'm not looking to serve anybody anyway at that
Right.
time. I just want to make sure that if people were saying, oh, well, you were open late, no, I wasn't. I'm just trying to make sure everything's crossed my eyes. You know how I'm screwing up saying it anyway.
Right.
Just want everything taken care of the way it's supposed to be. So I know if I don't have at least the extra half hour, we'll lose a lot of business because people will just go elsewhere.
Right.
That way, it's either, hey, at 5 o'clock tonight, guys, close up and have a nice night, which I don't want to do, because I had a lot of people say, why are you closing? Well, we're either open for the duration, or everyone's going to go someplace else. So that's what I'm trying to accomplish now. If I get it done now, then Chrissy can advertise and let people know we're going to be open and that type of stuff.
So last call's at midnight, essentially, or
Last call's 11:45, but it will basically be midnight this time.
basically
Yeah,
midnight,
so it's-
okay. All right,
Jason, any questions?
No, I will know, I do my research to make sure to patronize the pub as much as I can, and I certainly have seen,
What
since
are they, the
the,
Bills games on Saturday?
need somewhere to drown those sorrows.
They won yesterday.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Although recently,
Better than we did.
I've had a lot of Patriots fans to drown my sorrows
Yeah,
alongside. I have noticed a substantive change since there was the minor liquor license violation issue. And given that anecdotal observation, I'm okay with this going forward. Had I not observed those substantive changes,
Oh, yeah, no, we've been on top of it. We had the,
I
matter of
would
fact,
be more uncomfortable with this.
on the night before Thanksgiving was one of our busiest nights ever.
Right.
I had my nephew James, who's one of the bar managers, stand outside the door. Everybody came in one way.
Oh,
He
big
carded
move.
everybody and stamped everybody before they went in. If they went in with no stamp, they didn't get served. And we were so busy that night that everybody was stamped, because if you didn't get a stamp, we didn't even allow you in, because there's no sense taking chances. I had 3 bartenders, myself was there, and James was there, and that was pretty much, the busiest night we'd had since we'd opened. And we had no issues. It was a good night.
I'm just laughing because I was there.
Yeah, you were there. Did you get a stamp?
Actually, I was there so early that I didn't get a stamp.
Okay, you were in previous to the stamp mode.
With all due respect to Joe's considerations on having it be just a half hour, I just think for your own practical purposes, if you are gonna have a crowd there, and even if you serve till 1:15, you're gonna need enough time to get people out of there. You don't want them chugging them either.
Yeah, that's
So
just
I would
it.
say, I'd say go to 1.
I would add more time actually helps, if people are taking Ubers home and things like that
Right.
too, it actually allows people to, Uber driver to pick up an extra ride or something.
And I was happy to hear that, prior to even being questioned, you'd already planned on having additional staff
Oh,
on
yeah,
board. So
you
that's
have to,
good.
you have to.
Yeah, all right. Anything else we need to consider here, Anthony?
No?
Okay, and this would, you have a projected motion here. Are you okay, Joe, with just going forward as?
I'm just trying to, we talked to the chief about this.
Oh, I'm sorry, I should have, I thought that,
Maybe he's already been.
I think it already came out in the wash somewhere here, but not publicly tonight, yeah.
I expressed my concern via email to the packet. He says you had last call 11:45, I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, that's fine. We can keep the last call the same. I don't need to serve anymore after. I just want people be there, to let people know that, okay, you can stay for the ball to drop, but that's it. So don't be coming up, because I don't want to sell anymore. I really could care less. I just know that if I don't, my win is to be able to stay open so I can actually not close at 6. We'll do our regular business instead of losing and then losing on the holiday, and, it's kind of like a big wash.
Right.
But, yeah, no, the chief's right. I definitely could care less about selling for the last hour. I don't want to do that. I just want
I'll
to
make sure to go and keep an eye on them for you, chief.
No problem.
And inclusive of this too, we didn't mention this earlier, but inclusive in here is also a 11 a.m. to 12 a.m. on January 1st. What are you doing, mimosas on
No, that's,
No, I didn't ask for that.
no, so this is, it does sound confusing, but it's from
Should be
town
11
council.
PM.
No, so it's between 11 a.m. and 12 a.m.
Oh,
on January 1st. We still open couldn't be open the next day. So that's the way town council, because I scratched my head a couple of times and said, what?
Oh, yeah, only a lawyer could have written this.
Yeah, Tom Harrington. Thank you, town council.
So just one other comment about the motion. So it says to allow the sale of alcohol between 2 a.m. and 1 a.m. You're not really going to be selling up to 1 a.m.
It says 12 a.m. 12 a.m. and 1 a.m. You said 2 a.m., I
Right.
think.
I'm sorry, between 12 a.m. and 1 a.m.
Right.
But you're not going to be selling you're not going to be selling up to 1 a.m.
No, the last call will be 11:45, but the rule is now I have to have everything off the table at 12. So
Okay.
at 12 o'clock, if people are trying to toast, I don't want to be breaking the rules. I want everything to be, that's why I was asking for the extra time.
Okay. So it's okay the way it's worded?
This is
This
to
is town
satisfy
council.
the ABCC, this would be the motion. He would have the right to sell. We have to take him as his word
Right,
that
that
that's
he
what he's
won't.
gonna do, so.
Okay.
To satisfy the ABCC, this is the motion that we would let them know, and let them know that the pub does have the extra hour.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. Great. If everyone's satisfied, have the,
We're good?
Move forward on the motion?
Sure. Move that the hours of permitted sale of Common Foods, Inc., DBA Littleton Sub Shop, Pub on the Commons, Section 12, annual liquor license to allow the sale of alcohol between 12 a.m. and 1 a.m. and between 11 a.m. and 2 a.m. on January 1st for license year 2019 only, and to authorize the interim town administrator to notify the Alcoholic Beverages Control Commission of this change in hours and issue a revised license reflecting the change in hours.
second.
Ooh, tie.
Joking out.
All right, motion's been made by Selectman Napoli, seconded by Selectman Knox and Selectman Gerbig. Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? The ayes have it. Great. Good luck, Greg.
Greg,
Be safe.
Thank
Keep
you.
them safe.
My office later in the week, and we'll issue a certificate for that day.
Okay, great.
And,
I have to leave tomorrow morning for Florida, but I'll be back by the 28th.
Sure,
Okay?
that's
Okay,
fine.
I'll come by and see you. Thank you very much.
All right.
Great,
Guys, have a good
thanks.
one.
Safe travels.
Appreciate it.
Chocolate?
Always take chocolate.
Yeah.
Peppermint chocolate.
Yep.
especially.
Homemade.
All right.
We don't have minutes, Mr.
Right,
Chairman, as
okay.
I stated, so we do have an executive session item. It's for non-union contract strategy with respect to Fire Chief Scott Wazinski, Fire Deputy Chief Tom Clancy, and Police Deputy Chief Jeff Patterson.
Okay, and this is not a session we were actually looking to interact with the chiefs, right? Or was it?
It was with the chiefs. They were requested to speak to you. So, regarding the deputy chief positions.
Okay, getcha. All right, so perhaps when we get into executive session, then we'll handle each of those first, and then...
Right, and then we can,
Okay, everyone clear on that then? All right. This will have to be a roll call vote, so when we have the motion, it would be to go into executive session and then to not to convene an open session. And so with that,
Move that the Board of Selectmen vote pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 21, subsection A, Clause 2, to convene an executive session for contract negotiations with non-union personnel, Chief Wazinski, Deputy Chief Patterson, and Deputy Chief Clancy, and not to convene an open session thereafter.
okay, close, but I got that one. Motion's been made by Selectman Napoli, seconded by Selectman Knox. All those in favor?
roll call.
Yes, Selectman Napoli.
Aye.
Selectman Gerbig.
Aye.
Selectman Knox.
Aye.
And Selectman Glavy votes aye as well. Okay, folks, happy holidays. Motions, votes affirmative, and we'll enter into executive session. And we're inviting